The conference room suddenly fell silent. The young woman's words landed like an unexpected hammer blow in midair, suspended, heavy, waiting to drop. This clause, it reverses liability. If you sign it, your company will take on the full consequences. Maya Williams, just 16 years old, stood by the glass wall of the 27th floor conference room. She wasn't in a suit, didn't wear an expensive watch, just a pair of borrowed, worn-out shoes and a janitorial staff badge dangling from her neck. But her voice was clear, firm, and unwavering. Her gaze was locked on the contract Jackson Hale was just about to sign. The pen in his hand hovered in the air, his silver eyebrows furrowed, showing the tension and confusion building inside. Next to him, his wife, Clara, blinked in shock, her lips pressing into a tight line like she'd just been slapped by an invisible hand. Derek Vaughn, a Texas businessman with a polished smile, broke the silence with a forced chuckle. "Sorry. What did you just say?" His tone remained polite, but it carried the chill of a finely honed blade. Maya didn't blink. Read the clause on page 14. It transfers all legal responsibility related to the merger to Hale Investments. If anything goes wrong, fraud, lawsuits, bankruptcy, your company will bear it all. Vaughn's side will walk away clean. A few younger executives around the table exchanged glances. One pulled the contract closer, his hand trembling slightly. Another quickly scrolled through the document on his tablet. Across the table, Clara leaned forward, brow creased. Someone whispered, "She's not supposed to be here. She's the janitor's daughter." But Maya didn't back down. Just 8 hours ago, her world had been simple. A quiet rhythm of late-night cleaning crews. She wore a faded hoodie, a technical visitor badge, and worked silently beside her mother, wiping windows and collecting shredded paper like cogs in a machine. Everything had been routine until Maya noticed that file. It had been left on the copier, slightly ajar. On the cover, bold letters read, "Final Draft, Merger Agreement." She should have ignored it, but something made her stop, not curiosity, but instinct. Maya wasn't like most kids her age. She didn't spend hours scrolling social media. She read legal handbooks, watched financial documentaries with her grandfather, and had once written an award-winning essay titled "How Enron Collapsed." She flipped through the pages. The legal language was complex and winding, but she followed it. And then she stopped. In a subsection, Clause C, line 3, there it was, a trap, a subtle shift in wording that flipped the entire liability. If the deal collapsed or any legal trouble arose, Hale Investments would take the fall. If she had sprinted down the hallway, "Mom, have you ever seen a contract that just hands over a company like this?" Denise, scrubbing a glass wall, barely glanced over. "Maya, don't get involved in their business. You want us both to lose our jobs." Maya went quiet, but her mind didn't. It kept running, analyzing, comparing. Now, in the conference room, all eyes were on her. The air was frozen. Clara clutched her chair arm. Vaughn narrowed his eyes. Jackson Hale looked at Maya like he was truly seeing someone for the first time. Not a child, not a janitor's daughter, but a warning, a reflection, a near miss. He lowered the pen. "You said the clause reverses liability?" "Yes, sir," Maya replied, her voice steady. "And if you sign, there's no undoing it." "That clause is written in very standard legal language," Maya continued, eyes fixed on Jackson. "And that's exactly what makes it dangerous. It sounds protective, when in fact, it's a trap. If your team didn't comb through every line, you're walking into a noose." The room turned ice cold. Clara stood abruptly, her voice cracking like frost. "Jackson, this is absurd. She's just a child." But Jackson no longer heard his wife. He had lowered his head and was flipping back through the document. His finger paused on page 14. He read, stopped, and his jaw clenched. A small motion, but enough for the entire room to realize he had seen it. Derek Vaughn leaned forward, smirking. "Are we really letting a window washer run this meeting?" Maya flushed, but her voice was steel. "Laugh all you want. But if he signs, your company's name will be on every lawsuit that follows." Silence. Stillness so deep it felt like the whole building had stopped breathing. Then Jackson spoke, low and firm, like the final command on a battlefield. "Escort her out." Security stepped in immediately. Maya didn't resist. She stood tall, chin up, and walked steadily toward the door. But just before the glass doors closed behind her, she turned and met Jackson Hale's gaze. For a split second, he no longer saw a child, no longer saw a janitor's daughter. He saw a warning, a mirror, and a mistake he'd nearly made. The pen never touched the paper. The next morning, the stillness inside Hale Investments felt entirely different. It wasn't peace, it was tension, quiet, like a storm waiting to break. Down in the security office off the main lobby, Maya Williams sat alone. Her hands were clasped, chin raised, but her heart pounded like a war drum. The tall windows behind her reflected a cold light onto the marble floor, slick, polished, and as unfeeling as the stairs she had gotten that morning. She had been sitting there for over an hour. No one spoke to her, no one offered water, no one said what would happen next. And her mother, Denise, sat beside her, back rigid, face as still as stone. She hadn't said a word since they were both pulled from their night shift and told to wait downstairs. But her worried eyes said everything. Maya looked down and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom." Denise turned to her, voice flat and painfully calm. "You should be sorry. I do this job so we can eat, not so you can march into a boardroom like you own the place." Maya stared at the floor. "I didn't mean to embarrass you, but I read something dangerous, and if I stayed quiet, he would have signed it." Silence. Then Denise spoke, voice lower, more grounded. "I taught you to be brave, Maya, but I never taught you to be reckless." At that moment, the door opened. A woman walked in, composed, cold, precise, with a folder in hand. Her heels clicked on the marble floor like a warning rhythm. "Mrs. Williams," she said, without looking at Maya, "you're being placed on temporary suspension pending investigation. We'll contact you once a decision has been made." Denise's lips tightened. She stood, gripping her daughter's hand like a shield against the world. "Let's go," she said softly. Maya's stomach clenched as the two of them walked out of the building. The cold Chicago air slapped her face like a rude awakening. She turned back, gazing up at the glass and steel tower that pierced the gray sky, the place where she once believed she could make a difference. Now she wasn't even allowed inside. Meanwhile, on the 30th floor, Jackson Hale sat alone in his private office. The room was as silent as a chapel. The contract lay open on the desk, like the scene of an unresolved crime. Crisp white pages, filled with dense text, exposing a truth he had nearly overlooked. Jackson's finger traced the section Maya had pointed out, Part C, Line 3. She was right. It wasn't just vague. It was a calculated deception, crafted to look like a standard clause, but in reality, shifting all legal risk onto Hale Investments. He rubbed his forehead as if trying to erase a stain he hadn't even noticed before. "How did I miss this?" he muttered. In his head, Clara's voice replayed like a broken recording from the night before. "It's just a routine clause, Jackson. Trust me." Trust, a word that once carried weight. Now it echoed hollow. Jackson opened his laptop. His fingers flew as he pulled up other deals signed with Derek Vaughan's firm. Subsidiary names, offshore financial structures, legal phrasing. Everything was too tidy, too identical, too perfect to be real. His phone buzzed. Clara's name lit up the screen. He hesitated, then answered. "You didn't sign, did you?" she asked, voice sharp with urgency. "No," Jackson replied, his tone heavy. "You're overthinking this. My team thoroughly vetted Derek's company. Are you seriously letting that girl get in your head?" Jackson said nothing. She's just a kid. A janitor's daughter," Clara continued with a dry chuckle, but the laugh was icy. "You're really going to question me? Because of a child?" Jackson didn't respond. "I'm coming up," she said, and hung up. Across the city, Maya sat curled on the worn couch of their small apartment, a cold cup of cocoa in her hands. The yellow light cast soft shadows on the cracked walls. The place was humble, modest, but it held every ounce of her hope. Her mother sat across from her, scanning job listings, her eyes heavy with worry. "Do you regret it?" Maya asked quietly. Denise sighed. "We only regret that you lost faith in adults doing the right thing." Maya didn't reply, but deep down something told her she wasn't wrong. Suddenly a ping sounded. An email from a name she didn't recognize. Robert. Subject line, "You saw it too." Maya opened it. Inside was a brief message. "I used to work there. I know what you saw. If you want to talk, I'll listen." She stared at the keyboard, hesitating. Then she started to type. Maybe she wasn't alone. Back at the office, Jackson unlocked his safe. Inside was an old file folder marked Internal Report, Hale/Barnes Review. He flipped through it. Red ink markings. Ignored audits. Risks buried by the executive team. On one page, a handwritten note in bold red ink read, "Excessive risk concentration, urgent warning. One wrong signature and your career is over." Signed, Robert Barnes. Jackson leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar. Not doubt in others, but in his own instincts. Clara Hale was not one to wait. She entered her husband's office, like a woman unfamiliar with the word denied. Her heels clicked steadily across the oak floor, sounding like the soundtrack of decisions already made. She approached the desk where Jackson still sat, eyes not on her, but locked on the contract, untouched since that morning. "You haven't signed?" she asked. Arms crossed, her tone half mocking, half impatient. "You've had all day to think." Jackson didn't look up. "I need more time." The smile on Clara's lips faded slightly. "Jackson, this deal has a deadline. Derek is offering terms no one else would dare put on the table. You've seen the numbers. I've also seen the clause that could rip this company apart," Jackson said, his voice now stripped of softness, cold steel. Clara circled the desk, her perfectly manicured fingernails sliding along the edge of the document. "It's just a clause. Legal language. You know how these games work. Don't tell me. You trust the janitor's kid more than me?" Jackson finally looked up, slowly. His eyes were sharp as blades. "I saw it. No one else did. Not you, not the legal team, not even me." The silence that followed was absolute, like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Clara didn't flinch, but her voice dropped a register. "She's a child, Jackson, and she's made you question everything. That should concern you." "No." Jackson stood, his gaze firm and unshaken. "What concerns me is that she was right." That night, Maya sat huddled beside the old space heater in their small apartment, a string of encrypted files open on her laptop. Sent by Robert Barnes. Tax records, shell company charts, merger clause comparisons. Each page was another chilling piece of an intricate con. She didn't understand every legal term, but she understood enough to know this wasn't a mistake. This was a setup. Barnes had confirmed it in a short call earlier. Derek Vaughn had used this exact structure in a previous deal in Houston. The acquiring company took on all the liability. 6 months later, it collapsed under a mountain of lawsuits. One walked away with millions and vanished. Maya underlined the key terms: indemnification, contingent liability, potential responsibility, burden of performance, execution burden. She didn't need to understand every word, just to have a nose for it, and she could smell the rot from a mile away. "I can't believe he actually married that woman," Maya muttered. Her mother, washing dishes behind her, let out a dry laugh. "Power always falls for ambition, always has." At that moment, Jackson sat in the private lounge atop the tower, a space reserved for the elite. The glass of scotch on the table remained untouched. He wasn't drinking. He was watching. Across the room, blurred behind frosted glass, Clara sat with Derek Vaughn. They were laughing. Clara's hand rested gently on Derek's wrist. The Texas man's smile, both intimate and dangerous, curled slightly at the edge. Jackson squinted. He couldn't hear them, but body language was its own language. Clara leaned in. Derek nodded. And then, like a ritual, he handed Clara a small USB drive. Their fingers brushed. That touch wasn't businesslike. Jackson turned away, nausea rising in his throat. That woman. Was she truly the one he had built a life with? Or had she been part of the con from the very start? At home, Maya's phone buzzed. A message from Barnes. Check Clara's spending. 3 overseas transfers under her name. Cayman, Virgin Islands. Zurich. Maya's eyes widened. She's in on it, she whispered. Not just unaware. An accomplice. She opened her laptop and traced the public transaction records. Her hands began to tremble. There it was, Clara Hale's name, linked to a trust account supposedly frozen, listed under a Virgin Islands bank. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the building, Jackson opened an email from the bank's internal compliance team. The subject line hit like a punch to the chest. Alert, unusual access activity detected. He clicked it open. A transfer of $2.5 million had just been attempted by Clara from a dormant reserve account the company had long forgotten. Fortunately, the security system had flagged and blocked the transaction in time. Jackson sank into his chair. The noose wasn't just tightening around his neck. It was being tied from within his own house. That night, 3 people in 3 separate places couldn't sleep. Jackson Hale, now fully aware the ground beneath him was rotting. Maya Williams holding the jagged pieces of a game far bigger than any teenager should have to play. Clara Hale, sitting next to Derek Tavon in a black SUV, leaning in to whisper. He's starting to dig. Derek smiled, cold as steel. Then we bury him. Before he hits the roots, an email. No subject line, no sender, just one attached audio file. Jackson sat alone in his office. The ceiling above reflected the harsh light like a silent black hole. All his assistants had long gone home. He hadn't left. The air was thick, like even the building itself was holding its breath. He clicked play. Clara's voice came first, smooth, calculating. Won't suspect anything, as long as I push him at just the right moment. Then came the low, unmistakably Texan drawl of Derek Vaughn. And if he does suspect, we just remind him what he stands to lose. Jackson froze. He rewound it. Once, twice, 3 times. Each replay stripped away another layer of trust, falling like ash. Finally, he forwarded the recording to his private attorney and sat back, eyes lifted to the ceiling once more. No more doubt, only clarity. Clara wasn't just involved, she was leading it. Across town, Maya stood before the grand bronze doors of the Harold Washington Public Library. In her hand was a folder and a USB drive Barnes had sent earlier that morning. Her fingers were numb. Not from the cold, but from fear. Everything she and Barnes had uncovered pointed to one undeniable truth. Someone was actively trying to bury Hale Investments. She entered the computer lab. The files were encrypted, but Barnes had handwritten the passcode. Maya typed each character carefully, eyes locked on the screen. The truth unfolded. 3 mergers, 3 companies destroyed, all traced back to Derek Vaughn. And deep within the documents of each deal, electronic confirmations tied directly to Clara Hale, not just an accomplice, the mastermind, and she'd been doing it for years. That night, Maya brought the files to Barnes's apartment. But when she arrived, the door was unlocked. Inside, silence. No sign of a struggle, no sign of Barnes. Only a single envelope resting neatly on the kitchen counter. Her initials scrawled on the front. M.W. Maya opened it. Inside was a USB drive and a yellow sticky note. They may know I'm helping you. Don't come back here. Find someone you can trust. Fast. In the heart of downtown, Jackson Hale sat parked in front of a long abandoned courthouse. He wasn't there to see a judge. He was there to meet Victoria Cham, a former prosecutor, human rights attorney, and a legend for taking the kinds of cases no one else dared touch. She appeared like a shadow of justice, black wool coat billowing, no wasted words, just a presence that stilled the air around her. "Hello, Mr. Hale," she said, sliding into the passenger seat. "You came to the right person." "But this isn't just about contract fraud," Jackson nodded. "I know. You're up against an organized shadow financial system. It's possibly structured financial crime. Think high-level money laundering, I need to protect my company, Jackson said, then paused. And protect a young girl, the one who uncovered all of this. Victoria raised an eyebrow. A girl? Patient 16, name's Maya Williams. She saw what no one else did. For the first time, Victoria smiled. Serious eyes lit with a spark. Then she may be our most valuable witness. The next morning, Maya returned to the Hale Tower. Security was tighter. Her name wasn't on any list. She waited, arms clutched around a bag full of evidence, fingers frozen from more than just the cold. A young employee passed by, someone she'd seen during those late-night cleaning shifts. He glanced at her, then leaned in and whispered. Mr. Hale said, if you ever came back, bring you straight to his office. When Jackson saw Maya, his eyes softened, not as a CEO, but as a man finally seeing what he had once been blind to. He stood up and reached out, not with the authority of an executive, but with the silent humility of a confession. I owe you more than an apology. I owe you the truth. Maya looked up, her voice quiet but piercing like an arrow. Then let's bring it into the light. Before someone else disappears. They sat together in a private conference room, surrounded by documents, screens, relationship maps. It looked more like a war room than a boardroom. Victoria Chan entered moments later, nodding at Maya. This is your fight now, she said. But if we take the right steps, we'll win before the enemy even knows the battle has begun. Maya nodded. She was still shaking, but now it was from readiness, not fear. For the first time, she wasn't fighting alone. The cracks in the marble tower were no longer signs of collapse. They were where the light of truth began to shine through. No court had scheduled a hearing. No subpoena had been issued. No reporter knew anything yet. But the war had begun. Inside Jackson's office, the walls no longer displayed awards or investment charts. Now they were covered in whiteboards filled with notes, timelines, aliases, bank transfers, hidden connections. At the center of the room, sitting in the middle of the mess of truth, was Maya, 16 years old, typing on a borrowed laptop, surrounded by folders that could bring down an empire. Near the window, Victoria Chan spoke urgently into her phone. Jackson hovered over spreadsheets, his eyes red, his jaw tight. Victoria hung up. My contact at the DOJ, she said. They're watching Vaughn. But they need more evidence before they can act. Without a word, Maya pulled a yellow folder from her backpack and slid it toward them. Victoria added another folder on top. Just received this. Barnes sent it before he disappeared. Jackson opened it. Inside were accounting ledgers from foreign bank accounts, financial trails from places only those with secrets to hide would use. 3 names stood out like knives pressed into the paper. Clara Hale, Derek Vaughn, Raven Cross Holdings, a shell company registered in Bizet, regularly receiving payouts after every collapsed merger. Victoria let out a low whistle. This is beyond fraud. Jackson stared at the page, his voice thick with disbelief. This was a long game. Predatory, calculated. And it started under my own roof. That night, Maya and her mother Denise sat on the fire escape outside their old apartment building. Below them, the city buzzed with yellow cabs, floating music from late-night diners, and the scent of grilled food weaving into the air. Denise handed Maya a cup of chamomile tea. Her hands trembled slightly. They called again, she whispered. Said, if I don't stay quiet, they'll erase your school records. They said they can make everything disappear. Maya didn't look back. Her eyes stared into the distance. They've already tried, she said, voice soft but sharp as steel. You're still just a kid, Maya. This fight isn't yours. It became mine the moment they used people like us as shields. For the first time, Denise looked at her daughter and didn't see defiance. She saw purpose. This wasn't about rebellion. It was about standing up for what was right. The next morning, at the Hale Foundation Gala, a glittering charity event where Clara usually basked in camera flashes and champagne flutes, something had changed. Jackson Hale wore a black tuxedo, but his face was cold and resolute. He stepped onto the stage, holding a microphone. Before we begin, he said, scanning the glowing ballroom, they want to speak not as a businessman, but as a man who once made a mistake. Clara, standing by the wine table, went rigid. Her hand tightened around a crystal glass, eyes locked on her husband like glass about to shatter. For years, I believed building an empire meant trusting only numbers. Jackson took a breath. But numbers don't betray you, people do. The room buzzed with murmurs. Several eyes turned toward Clara. I reviewed every deal my company ever signed. And what I found, or more accurately, what a courageous young girl found, shook me awake. Victoria Chan stood at the back of the hall, arms crossed. She said nothing, but her gaze burned with quiet strength. Jackson stepped off the stage. No questions, not because he feared them, but because he had already chosen his battlefield. Sometimes silence is the strike. That night, Maya sat by her bedroom window, watching the faint lights flicker along the skyline. On her lap was a new folder, filled with flagged emails, a single line, sharp as a blade, in the dark, starting to pull out. You know what to do. From Clara to Derek. Maya began copying the email to the secure drive, but just then, the lights flickered. Her laptop screen went black. Her phone buzzed. A message, unknown number. Stop digging, or we'll bury first. Maya's hands trembled. She stared at the black screen, but she didn't shut the laptop. Instead, Maya grabbed a Sharpie, opened a fresh sheet of paper, and wrote 3 words in bold strokes. Not backing down, because now, this wasn't just about a company. It was a battlefield, and the girl everyone thought would be ignored was becoming the voice no one could silence. The media hadn't reported anything yet, but whispers were already circulating through Chicago's financial district, in elevators, over morning espressos. Hale Investments was under internal investigation. A merger had been suspended. A whistleblower had emerged, anonymous. Some called it routine. Others smelled blood in the water. In a high-rise office, Jackson Hale sat still, eyes fixed on the gray skyline. I built this company from scratch and nearly handed it to a suit-shaped shadow. Victoria Chan sat across from him, flipping through a folder of evidence. You didn't hand it over, she said calmly. You paused. And that's the only thing that matters right now. She laid down a page showing a BSpace account, Derek Vaughn's handwriting marked on it. But now, she added, this isn't business anymore. This is about justice. At that same moment, Clara Hale descended the grand staircase of her penthouse on Lakeshore Drive, her navy silk dress draped flawlessly, as if nothing beneath her designer heels was crumbling. A housekeeper handed her a cream envelope. This was in the mailbox outside. Clara opened it without haste. Inside, a photo. Jackson, sitting with Maya and Victoria, head bowed over a folder, 3 signatures circled in red. Next to it, a handwritten note. You're losing control. Clara didn't blink. She quietly picked up her phone and dialed Derek Vaughn. That evening, at a private investor summit at the Four Seasons Hotel, Derek Vaughn strolled through the lobby like a man with nothing to hide, expensive whiskey in hand, the polished smile still intact. But something had shifted. People still nodded, but too quickly. Some avoided eye contact. Others whispered as he passed. Eventually, Derek found Jackson near a balcony. Well, looks like you've kicked the hornet's nest, Derek said, with a half smile. Jackson didn't shake his hand. I didn't stir anything, he replied. I just stopped pretending I couldn't see. Derek leaned in, voice slick. If you go public with this, you're not just taking me down. You're dragging your wife's name through the mud, panicking the board, crashing the stock price. Is that the legacy you want? Jackson looked him dead in the eye. I'd rather lose a company than live a lie. Back at their apartment, Denise hung up the landline and turned to Maya, her expression heavy. The principal just called, she said softly. Someone filed an anonymous complaint accusing you of emotional disruption at school. Maya frowned. I haven't even been to school this week. Denise squeezed her hand. They're trying to rattle you. You're scaring them. Maya looked down at the pile of documents in her lap. She didn't feel fear. She felt one thing only. Readiness. That weekend, Victoria Chan filed the first motions in court. Motion to block the merger, petition for independent audit of Vaughn Global, request for whistleblower protection for Maya Williams. The news broke before sunset. Breaking. Hale Investments halts. Merger. Emergency. Legal review. Under. Key witness. An unnamed teenage source. A school yearbook photo of Maya was clipped and circulated, shared, commented, spread like wildfire. Some praised her, others doubted, some attacked, but no one could ignore her. What do you think of Maya, a young woman thrust into the storm without choosing it, yet standing firmer than anyone else? The truth, once spoken, cannot be unsaid. Would you have the courage to speak up when you're the last voice left in a crowd gone silent? Before dawn broke, Jackson Hale walked into the boardroom. In his hands, a thick folder. He set it on the table like a verdict. The directors were already waiting. Their faces were tense, as if each one were perched on a cliff edge ready to crumble. "I should have seen this sooner," Jackson began, his voice slow but steady. "But I let comfort blind me." He handed out the documents, audit reports, shell company registries, emails, even the audio recording. Evidence sharp as needles against every tailored suit in the room. Then he looked at each of them, straight in the eye. "You have two choices. Help me clean this house from the inside, or watch it burn from the outside." No one spoke, but one by one, slowly they nodded. Miles away, at a cafe near the Loop, Clara Hale sat across from Derek Vaughan. But this time, her eyes no longer held grace. They were cold. "Hello, do you understand?" "It's not," Derek smirked. "Then maybe it's time we stop being quiet too." He slid a black folder across the table. Inside was a list. Judges, journalists, a federal employee. Clara closed the folder slowly. "Then we bury them." But across the street, on a city bus, Maya Williams was watching. Her phone was recording everything. This wasn't a game anymore, and the unraveling had just begun. By Monday morning, Hale Investments was no longer a financial fortress. It had become a battlefield. Internal servers were under routine maintenance. But everyone knew that was a lie. The audit department worked through the night. Lawyers whispered behind closed doors. HR began flagging internal emails with keywords. Offshore, Vaughan, whistleblower, Jackson Hale. And Jackson? He stood in the center of the storm, calm, eyes sharp, ready for war. In her luxury penthouse, Clara Hale sat alone in the pale winter light. Phone pressed to her ear, her voice a whisper. "They're coming." Derek's voice came through, steady, flat. "Let them come. We don't run. We strike back." "You said everything was buried." "It was." "And who dug it up?" Clara hissed. "You don't get it. This isn't Jackson. It's the girl, the kid, and she's tearing this whole tower apart." Silence. Then Derek, ice cold. "Then maybe it's time the world finds out who's really in charge." At school, Maya tried to keep her head down, but it wasn't easy. Half the class looked at her like a ghost. The other half avoided her like she was contagious. Someone whispered traitor. Another murmured hero. Different. She ignored them all, but when she opened her locker, a folded note fell out. She opened it. Messy handwriting. Read, "We know where you live. Keep your mouth shut if you want to stay safe." Her hand shook, but only for a moment. Then she stuffed the note into her pocket, grabbed her books, and walked straight to the principal's office. She told them everything. By the end of the day, Victoria Chan had filed for legal protection for both Maya and her mother. That night, Jackson received a message from an unknown number. "That girl doesn't deserve it." He stared at the screen, then picked up the desk phone and called Victoria. "Can you get the feds involved yet?" "They're already watching," Victoria replied. "But they need someone willing to testify publicly." Silence, and Jackson exhaled. Deep and clear. "Then I'll do it." The next morning, the Chicago Tribune ran a headline across the front page. CEO exposes internal conspiracy, teen whistleblower, link to billion-dollar scheme. Maya's name wasn't released, but the story was everywhere. Radio, Twitter, morning TV. At the press conference, Jackson stood behind the podium. Beside him were Victoria Chan and two federal agents. "I was blind," Jackson said to the world. "Not just to the lies, but to courage. A 16-year-old girl saved my company from the inside. A company that never once looked at her beyond the uniform she wore for her mother's job." He paused. "Let the silence speak for itself. She thought what we refused to. And from this day forward, we will see her." That afternoon, Maya returned home. But outside the worn steps of her apartment building, A crowd was waiting. Neighbors, reporters, strangers. A few held handmade signs. We believe Maya. Truth has no age. He froze on the first step, speechless. Her mother gently squeezed her hand. Don't worry, she said softly. They're not here to hurt you. They're here to thank you. In a high-rise suite, where the glass walls caught the last rays of sunset, Derek Vaughan sat in silence, eyes locked on his tablet screen. A still image filled the display. Maya Williams stepping up to the witness stand. Behind him, Clara Hale paced the room, her heels ticking like a countdown clock. She's just a kid, Clara snapped. You really think they'll let some girl bring us down? Derek's voice was ice. Kids don't collapse empires, but symbols can. He stood, snapped the tablet shut, and headed for the door. We break hers before she becomes one. The next morning, the courthouse steps shook under a storm of flashing cameras and murmuring crowds. Above, gray clouds draped over downtown Chicago, but the air crackled with anticipation, like the overture to a fateful symphony. Courtroom 12B, small in size, bursting with tension. Jackson Hale adjusted his tie, his eyes on the double wooden doors at the back. Victoria Chan stood beside him, reviewing her final notes. 2 rows back sat Maya Williams, dressed simply, hair neatly braided, eyes fierce with a quiet fire. It was the first day of hearings. Across the aisle, Derek Vaughan sat like a man used to winning, expression calm, eyes detached, as if money could erase guilt. Beside him, Clara Hale wore a form-fitting slate-gray suit, her face blank, her lips pressed into a hard line. Not once did she glance at her ex-husband. The judge entered. All rise. Victoria began, not with drama, but with cold, clear truth. She painted a picture not with emotion, but with evidence. Dates, signatures, contracts, legal breakdowns. Bit by bit, she unraveled the web. Shell companies, forged authorizations, and the systematic shifting of liability onto Hale investments, while Vaughan and Clara secretly profited through offshore accounts. Clara never once looked at Jackson. Then came the moment the room had waited for. Victoria stood, voice clear and firm. Your Honor, I call Maya Williams to the stand. The entire courtroom drew a sharp breath. Reporters scrambled, cameras clicked rapidly. Maya rose. She walked to the stand. Not a victim, not just a girl, but the first person in the room to speak the truth. She placed her hand on the Bible. Her voice was soft but steady, like a vow sealed in fate. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Victoria gave a slight nod, then asked the first question. Miss Williams, how did you come to be involved in this matter? Maya answered calmly, without hesitation. I was helping my mother during her night shift on the 27th floor. She's a janitor. I found a contract left behind in the print room, and the signature at the bottom didn't look right. She paused, then added, I read the fine print, and the contents weren't right either. There was a deeply buried clause. It transferred all legal liability from Mr. Vaughan's company to Mr. Hale's. If anything went wrong, only one party would face the fallout. Victoria leaned forward slightly. Why were you speaking up? You were only 16 at the time. No one asked you to read it. No one expected you to say anything. Maya looked straight ahead, not at Victoria, but at Clara, then Derek, and finally at the jury. Just because I clean your floors doesn't mean I can't see the garbage being swept under your rugs. The courtroom went still. The judge paused. Clara shifted. For the first time, Derek didn't smile. Cross-examination began. Vaughan's lawyers didn't hold back. Mr. Williams, do you fully understand all the legal terms in that contract? Maya replied, composed. No, sir. But I understood enough to know someone was hiding something. Do you consider yourself an expert in corporate law? No, but I believe you don't need a law degree to know when someone's being set up to fail. The jury looked at her with new eyes. No longer a child, but a voice for every person ever ignored, dismissed, or overlooked. After a recess, it was Jackson Hale's turn on the stand. Victoria asked just one question. Where did you believe Maya? Jackson paused. The room seemed to slow. My instincts told me she was right. But more than that, I remembered something I'd forgotten. And what was that? Jackson looked toward Maya, his voice low, vigorated. Integrity. doesn't depend on title. Sometimes it takes a janitor's daughter to see the cracks before the boardroom ever does. Then came Clara Hale's turn. The room held its breath. She stepped up, sat straight, her face stone. But then the audio played. Her voice echoed from the speaker. If he starts suspecting, we just remind him what he stands to lose. Clara closed her eyes, her hands clasped tightly together, and for the first time since the hearing began, she spoke without a script. I didn't think it would go this far. I just wanted to push the deal through, so Jackson would never find out, Victoria asked. And when Maya exposed everything, Clara's voice broke. I wanted her to disappear because she saw everything I spent years trying to bury. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited like a pack of hungry wolves. But Maya didn't exit through the front. She slipped out the side door. Jackson was there, waiting. No reporters, no lights. You didn't have to come, Maya said softly. Jackson replied, I owe you this. To be the man you once believed I was. When you walked into that boardroom, Maya smiled. Not big, but real. He's almost there, Victoria said quietly, eyes fixed ahead. Inside the courtroom, Clara quietly returned to her seat beside Vaughn. She didn't speak, but the silence said everything. The empire was cracking, and in the eyes of the jury, they didn't just see fraud. They saw a betrayal of trust, betrayal of truth, betrayal of those who were never supposed to speak. Tomorrow, the jury would deliberate, but tonight, the world was watching. The trial resumed at noon the next day. The jury entered, their faces stern. Maya sat between Victoria and her mother, gripping the hem of her skirt. Behind them, Jackson Hale stood in silence, hands clasped, gaze steady. Across the aisle, Derek Vaughn wore a faint, bitter smile. Clara sat with her head bowed, eyes fixed on the floor. The judge struck the gavel. Court is now in session. The 4 defendants stood. For the charge of conspiracy to commit corporate fraud, we find you guilty. For the charge of falsifying financial records, guilty. For the charge of obstructing and tampering with legal contracts, guilty. Each word landed like a hammer against stone. A lifetime of scheming, unveiled and undone. Derek's smile vanished. Clara closed her eyes. No protest. No appeal. The judge pronounced sentencing, 10 years in federal prison. No parole for the first 7. For the first time in days, Maya exhaled. Outside the courthouse, the world had changed. Reporters swarmed. Questions flew like arrows. Maya, how does it feel to be the girl who saved the company? Mr. Hale, will you be restructuring Hale Investments? Victoria, what's next for the young whistleblower? Maya didn't answer them all. Only one question made her stop. What do you want the public to remember about this case? She turned to the nearest camera. Her eyes didn't waver. Truth doesn't need a title, and justice doesn't care if your shoes are polished. In the weeks that followed, Hale Investments didn't collapse. It was reborn. Jackson Hale led a full restructuring. Clara's name was erased from all board records. Vaughn's assets were frozen. Victoria Chan became the company's new chief ethics officer, a position that had never existed before. And Maya Williams? She received a full scholarship. At a special press conference held in the same building she once cleaned, Jackson Hale announced, "Today, Hale Investments officially establishes the Maya Williams Scholarship for young minds with vision and courage." Maya didn't just save this company. She reminded us who we once were and who we're meant to be. Applause thundered. Maya stood beside him, wearing a white blazer, a quiet smile on her face. She didn't need to shout, because it was her silence that made the world listen. That night, in his office, Jackson wasn't alone. Maya walked in, holding a yellow envelope. "I got my acceptance letter from Columbia," she said, her eyes shining. Jackson smiled. "You earned it." Then he paused. "You didn't just win a seat at that school. You've earned a place at any table you choose." Maya lingered at the doorway. Before leaving, she turned back, hesitating. "Do you regret it?" she asked. Jackson turned to the window, where Chicago's skyline burned in amber light, as if the city was being rebuilt, layer by layer. "In truth, I regret not seeing it sooner," he said softly, honestly. "But I don't regret the one who stood up when I couldn't." Maya nodded, then left the envelope on his desk. quietly, just as she had entered the story. A few days later, Clara Hale was formally admitted to a federal detention center in Wisconsin. She said nothing, no appeal, no statement, only silence. In the cold gray cell, the concrete walls stripped the last traces of power from an empire that once sat atop the world. The news ticker scrolled her name under convicted, flickering like static on a dying signal. Clara pressed play on the tiny recorder again, the one audio clip that sealed her fate. Maya's voice echoed once more, like a scar that would never fade. Just because I clean your floors doesn't mean I can't see what's hidden under the rug. And kept playing. And again, no one else spoke. Telling the truth, high above, in an office that looked over a city in transition, Jackson Hale placed Maya's envelope on the top shelf of his bookcase, beside his most prestigious awards, and in the center a small plaque engraved with, "Truth doesn't shout, but it lasts forever." He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. One girl had pointed to a single signature and changed everything. From the ashes of deception, a new foundation had risen, cleaner, stronger, unshakable. The empire didn't fall, it was rebuilt by the very person they never saw coming.